Welcome to the Law School Toolbox Podcast. Today, we're talking about something everyone needs to think about, networking. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the Catapult Conference. Alison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on iTunes. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started.
Welcome back. Today, we're talking about a topic every law student needs to think about, networking. Whether you are an extrovert or an introvert, this episode is for you. Now, I know networking is a bad word for a lot of folks, and it might even cause some anxiety when you hear it. I mean, some people seeing a networking event on your calendar can make you sigh loudly and start looking for excuses to get out of it. I mean, we've all had those days when it takes a ton of motivation to get dressed up and go out to a networking event to meet new people, even when the couch and the DVR are calling your name. But in this current job market, legal networking is really important. So we want to actually help you change your perspective on networking right here. Networking isn't just about stuffy functions where everybody dresses up and wears suits and makes boring small talk. In fact, you don't even have to do it in person. And you shouldn't really have to decide to network. You shouldn't have to plan to network. Network's basically just living, and it should be part of your daily or weekly ritual in law school.
Great. So now that we've got everyone's buy-in that this is important, before we dive into the nitty-gritty, let's talk a little bit about how networking really led to you and I starting even the Law School Toolbox.
Right. So, I think that was at a point where both of us had just started something pretty new. We kind of weren't sure where it was necessarily going to lead us. And I know, at least for me, I was basically talking to anybody who would talk to me. Partly that was just to get out of the house. Because I was sitting alone in my kitchen, literally working at my kitchen table on my laptop. And at some point, you need to talk to other people.
It's true. It's good to get out.
Yeah. So I think, the way that we met is we really met on Twitter. I think I had posted an article and you sent me something saying, hey, you might be interested in this article I wrote on the same topic. And I went and looked at your website and I was like, oh, this person seems, pretty knowledgeable, pretty reasonable. Wouldn't mind meeting them. And then it turned out that we actually lived like a few blocks from each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And both loved coffee. So
yeah.
We naturally then went for coffee, and the rest is history. But that leap of faith and that willingness to just send that direct message or, to share a link really led to us finding out that we had a ton in common about how our philosophies around what we were both doing really meshed with each other.
Right. And people might hear this story and think, oh, well, you just sent that one link and it's all magic and you just happened to hit it off. But I don't know about you, but I had a lot of coffee first dates.
Yeah.
Business dates. Like I talked to a lot of people for coffee, and some of those people, are in the same space and I'm still friendly with them. But it's not, I think part of the thing about networking is rarely, it's sort of like dating. Rarely is that first swipe on Tinder going to be your lucky one. Maybe
true.
It is, but you gotta, it's the same thing. You got to kiss a lot of frogs in the networking arena before you find your prince.
Yeah. And we didn't decide to start the Law School Toolbox on our first coffee date. I think that was
actually the second one.
It was the second. We at least made it to lunch by the time we decided to start a business.
Yeah. I think it was actually at the end of lunch, to be technically correct. So, this was kind of like getting married after a blind date.
A little bit.
And it worked out. But, I think you've got to put yourself out into these positions where if you never go on that first coffee date or you never, and let's face it, most people on Twitter may or may not respond to your unsolicited link. People email me links all the time and they might be amazing, but I'm probably not necessarily going to meet them right now because that's just not feasible.
Right.
But, a lot of these are kind of low impact ways that you can reach out to people.
And I think the great lesson here is to try and say yes, try and look for those opportunities to connect with people because you don't know who's going to be meaningful. We joke this is a lot like dating, but I almost didn't go out with my husband on our first date. And that would have been a huge mistake clearly changed the trajectory of my life. But, I actually had a moment where I'm like, oh, I can make time for this. Like, I had this philosophy at the time of like trying to say yes to things. When opportunities presented themselves, I tried to say yes. And I'm glad that I was in that headspace because I may not have said yes to going out with my husband. But I think networking or building your network or just being open to meeting new people, you kind of have to have this philosophy of just saying yes. If somebody reasonable who you think you might have something in common with wants to chat on the phone or share some information, or if you're local, have coffee, you can spare that time. You just don't know what the outcome may be.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people view this in a very transactional sort of way. I mean, a little bit less for lawyers and law students, but certainly business people and business students have a real tendency to do this where they immediately sort of evaluate, does Lee possibly have anything that could be helpful to me? And if they don't immediately see like, oh, yes, then they don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
But, I don't think I personally find that a pretty annoying approach to life. But if you've ever been at a party with a lot of MBA students, that's kind of how they, it literally is. You could see them kind of filtering through like, okay, does this person have anything to offer me? And if the answer is no, they just walk off. And it might turn out that, if they dug a little deeper, they might have found out something else. I mean, a friend of mine has funny stories about, he's a professor now, but he used to be a consultant at BCG. And he's like, the reaction that I get if I tell them I'm a philosophy professor versus if I tell them, oh, yes, now I'm a professor, but I do business, blah, blah, blah. And I used to be a consultant at BCG. He gets a totally different reaction, but he's the same person.
That's interesting.
So, I mean, part of that, I guess, the storyline is, present yourself in a way that makes people want to talk to you. But I don't know. I find that's the level of transactional behavior when people are thinking about networking just to be a little obnoxious, personally.
Yeah. And I think that you don't know enough to know if somebody has something to offer you. I mean, even if at first glance, you may not think that you have professional things in common. If you have personal things in common, somebody could still remember you when somebody approaches them for needing a lawyer or with a job opportunity or things like that. I mean, especially in the legal community, gosh, we're always being asked for referrals and do we know somebody here or there or who does something or who works somewhere. And part of it is just like keeping in mind, who is in our community that we can connect people with. And part of that's just meeting people. You just need to know who's out there.
It's meeting people and it's also having those people be top of mind. And
yeah.
So I think we'll probably talk about this in the course of this episode, but just having a one-off coffee meeting with someone is probably not going to be, a lasting lifetime relationship.
Right.
But if you can keep in touch with that person, and, networking is a two-way street. I mean, you've got to be thinking about what do I have to offer this person? Why would they ever want to speak to me again? And if it's something, one of the things that can be really valuable, but also intimidating is something like an informational interview. So if I'm a law student and I have an interest in a certain area of law, there may be people in my area that I'm interested in meeting and learning from. And there are ways to go about doing this that are actually very effective. I have a whole series, in fact, on the Girls Guide to Law School site that I wrote a long time ago, complete with scripts and everything else that you can use. But after that first meeting, which can be great, you need to be thinking about how can I stay top of mind for this person so that maybe later they want to talk to me or, help me. And so it could be even something as simple as sending them an article that you've seen. I mean, that's something I just kind of do by nature all the time. I mean, I'm constantly sending people articles. A friend of mine who has kids is like, why are you always reading all these articles about parenting? I'm like, I don't know. I just saw it and thought it had relevance to your 3-year-old. She's like, yeah, it's really weird. She's like, I get more articles from you about parenting tips than like anyone who has a kid.
Well, as a mom in your network, I appreciate those articles.
No, she's like, yeah, they're always really interesting and like really on point, but like, how do you even find this stuff? I was like, I don't know. I just see it and I think like, oh, this might be interesting. It seems to be relevant to your kid. Like, I'll send it on over. And that's a great way in a professional context to keep yourself top of mind. And it's really easy. If you're reading this stuff anyway, or, you come across a law review article that relates to something you talked about in this informational interview, I can pretty much guarantee you the person who works in this area would be really happy to get that.
Yep. I think that's really true. And, if you are the person who's kind of driving the relationship, say it's like a more of a mentor-mentee type networking relationship, if you are let's say the mentee, so the person who is a law student or a young lawyer, and you are looking to engage with the more senior person, I have one person in our network who is in law school, and if she's listening to the podcast, she will know who she is, who is excellent at following up for kind of networking and just keeping in touch and suggesting a coffee date or checking in and letting me know how her summer internship is going. And it's not like she's needy or that she needs something. I find it really pleasant. I'm like, oh, it's so nice to see her name in my inbox and hear how she's doing. And I enjoy having coffee, but I am super busy and I am actually really bad at remembering to check in with other people sometimes because life gets a little crazy. And so I appreciate her kind of staying on top of the relationship, and then I get the benefits of still getting the relationship too. And it's not annoying. It's really nice. So, right. Remembering that there is a way to just kind of engage with someone and just be in their top of mind, keep them apprised of what's going on, say hello, but, don't worry that it's being oppressive. Most people will be like, oh, that was so nice to hear from so-and-so who sent me that link. I did find that interesting. Maybe we should go have coffee.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's actually one really easy place where a lot of people kind of drop these relationships is if you go out for coffee with someone or they talk to you on the phone or even if they give you advice in an email, one thing that makes a really enormous difference from the perspective of the person who is kind of helping you is to give them the outcome. Mm-hmm. So sometimes someone will write to me and they'll say, they'll ask me a question about something and I'll write them back because why not? It takes a few minutes. Maybe I can help them. And then sometimes it's a year later and they write and they say, hey, I really appreciated your advice on this. I just wanted to let you know this was the outcome. Say, for example, I transferred schools and I'm much happier in my new school. And I really appreciate the advice you gave me about how to do that. That's great. If I ever hear from that person again, I'm super happy to talk to them because I know that they actually took action. They implemented my advice and then they care enough to follow back up and let me know what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's so true. I mean, it's just thoughtful. It's just being a thoughtful person. You oftentimes do these types of relationships with, your friends or family, even people you don't see very often. And in your professional world, you can kind of build similar relationships. Just saying like, oh, you popped into my head. I'm going to send you a note. I'm going to follow up and let you know how this went. It's all just like good, warm, fuzzy stuff that makes you likable. Right.
I mean, basically networking is really building your community. Mm-hmm. And, your community may have really close ties and then these looser ties. And ironically, they found that people with these looser ties, so it's not just, your immediate family or your significant other or your really close friends, but if you have a broad network, that actually enables you to more easily find a job, for example, if you need it, because these loose ties are people who are more likely to have information you don't already have.
Right.
I mean, you and I probably have a lot of the same information about what's going on in the world. You and your husband, have similar ideas about what's going on. You have similar people you talk to. But if you think about someone that might be as a professional contact that we're friendly with, that we don't talk to all the time, they may have a totally different idea of what's going on in the world. And so that's really what helps people ultimately get these jobs.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So now that hopefully folks have bought into the importance of this, why don't we dig into some of the nitty gritty about kind of what is networking and how do you do it? So as we've kind of discussed, networking is the act of just connecting with people, and it's an opportunity to build your community. And I think it's important to think of it as a community and not just as a, professional network. Because having that broad definition of community means that these connections can serve you in a lot of different ways. Oftentimes go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think community is really the key because sometimes people get, again, really focused on, I have to just meet lawyers. Got to meet lawyers. It's like, well, who hires lawyers? Mm-hmm. Other people.
Right.
Maybe some of those people could be helpful. Maybe they know other people who could be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing to think about is oftentimes through networking, you're just connecting with people you have things in common with. It's just like making new friends. So like Alison and I were talking about when we met, we were both writing about similar stuff. So I was sure we had something in common. Turned out we had a lot more in common than just writing about similar things. But that was enough to have something to talk about. So you knew we could go to coffee and we'd have something to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's also a key, is it could just be one small thing. you really only have to find one piece to connect around, and at least initially.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that can be intimidating if someone's at an event or something and you think like, oh, I've got to like find the perfect person to talk to. Well, I'll tell you what my strategy was when I was at like networking lawyer events, when I didn't, or really any kind of networking event, when I didn't know people, I would just stand by the food. Because you know what? If you're standing by the food, you have something to talk about.
It's true.
Because someone who comes up and they're like looking like maybe they want to talk to someone, but they don't know how to get it started, you can be like, hey, have you tried this particular brioche or whatever? It's amazing. Like, give it a shot. Yeah. And then suddenly you've got something in common you can talk about.
Yep. I think that's a really, really good point. And I think when you think about meeting new people and networking, the breadth of relationships that can be valuable is so expansive that it's important to just keep in mind that, sure, somebody you meet might become a mentor. Sure, somebody might become a potential client. Sure, somebody might become a potential referral, but you just don't know. Just be open to this huge network, and different times of your life, different people will become more meaningful to you. Even if you think about friendships, like you probably have friendships that kind of come in and out of your life when you have more things in common about what's going on, or when you need something that somebody is in a position to help you with. And as you build kind of this professional community, I think it's just important to keep in mind that you just don't know what these relationships are, but a variety of your relationships will serve you at some point.
Right. And I think that's particularly key if you're in law school, because, you're in law school and it also kind of seems like fun and games, and you go out to bar review night with these people and you hang out with them and you go to, the law school prom or whatever it is. But ultimately, these are the people who will be your professional contacts. And it's amazing if you sit and look 5 or 10 years down the road, what people will end up doing.
Yeah, that's true. And apparently someone from my law school class just announced they're running from Congress somewhere in the Midwest. Yeah. So you never know.
No, I mean, I have tons of people who worked in the White House and government and like all different kinds of things. And would I have necessarily predicted like, oh, that person would end up doing that? No. Right. So, it can't be like, oh, I'm going to try to be friends with this person because I know that they're going to end up doing X, Y, or Z. That's not really the way it works. But I think, and part of this is really about your reputation in law school. Another one of those dirty words. But I think, being a person who's generally personable, likable, not a jerk, these can actually pay off a lot in the long run. Yeah,
because in fact, yesterday I had an email chain from a girlfriend from law school to kind of a group of us who were friends looking for a lawyer. And, she's back east, but it was a lawyer that didn't need to be, like a local lawyer. And we're still her network of people who she reaches out to try and find a referral. So of course, I'm going to be like, oh, well, here are the people we use in our business, or here's, someone else I know who does this sort of work, or what price point are you looking for? I have different options for different price points. I mean, this is how the real world works. You want to have those relationships ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, lawyers, as you say, you're just constantly, you will be that person that everyone in your life comes to for a referral.
Oh, yeah.
And so, that also is something you need to start building up. It's like, who are the people that I trust? Who are the people that I would choose not to refer business to? Those are equally valid sides of the same coin.
Yeah. It's always good to have, everybody should have a family law lawyer they can refer somebody to. I think everybody needs an employment lawyer they can refer somebody to. In the Bay Area, real estate lawyers, landlord tenants.
Immigration,
criminal. Criminal defense, like DUIs and stuff like that. You always want to have somebody who can fix a DUI for somebody else. So it is pretty funny, but you start to have kind of a list of your go-to people, employment plaintiff side, employment defense side. And it's nice because I know that my list of people I feel really good about. And so if you email me for a lawyer, I can be like, yeah, I either went to law school with this person or I know them professionally and they have a great reputation. Like, I think you're safe contacting this person. I believe what they say. And that's important, and it's important for me to keep up with their careers so I know what kind of work they're doing and make sure that they could still be those referrals for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're describing is something that anyone who's in the legal field should aim to be, which is that trusted resource.
Yeah.
And, you know, for obviously the type of work that you're doing, but also for other people to come to you and say, who do you trust? Who should I talk to?
Right.
Because, you know, and for me, I didn't go to law school at a local school in the Bay Area. So people know that, oh, you're in San Francisco, and they ask me for referrals. But usually the first thing I do is I email you.
Right.
Hey, Lee, do you have a family lawyer in Alameda that you could recommend?
Right. And then oftentimes I'll say no, but I can ask my family law friend who practices in this part of the Bay Area for her list because she's going to have someone in Alameda. I mean, that's how this works. And
yeah, exactly. I mean, I get random stuff. Hey, you know, my friend's boyfriend just got detained by, you know, immigration in a specific area of Arizona. I mean, that seems kind of random. Do I personally know someone who can deal with that? No, but I'm literally 1 degree connected from probably 2 or 3 people who do know the answer to that.
Exactly. And it's that chain of connection, that chain of kind of, I don't know what the best word is, but that you have some faith that who you're going to find through that chain of personal relationships is going to be legitimate and serve your connection well.
Yeah, and many of those people I may have met personally once or twice, but even those 1 or 2 times, it makes me feel like they're a real person. I follow their work. I know what they do. I trust their judgment. That's the kind of reputation you want to be developing in law school and also as a lawyer.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, that sounds great, but how do we actually do this?
Well, unfortunately, you do probably want to try and go physically to some events, but I don't think they have to be strictly networking events. It's likely your school or the legal community in the city that you're going to school in will have networking events. Sometimes folks can find these really intimidating or boring or frustrating. But I think
they all can be.
And they can be, and they definitely can be. But I think it's important to also open your mind a little bit to a more broader group of events, including nonprofit events or conferences or other gathering places where you're likely to meet people that you have something in common with.
I think that's right. I mean, I think conferences are an amazing place to meet people because everyone is there. You're all stuck together. You have apparently some interest in the same topics. You know, there usually are ways that people are designed to be put together, like whether it's a social, you know, evening event or even just between after a panel, you can linger in the hallway and be like, oh, what did you think about that? You know, what did you think about that thing this person said? I thought that was really interesting. Great way to meet people. Also, you know, even something like a meetup, and it doesn't have to be specifically legally related. Again, you just never know who you're going to meet. For example, I go to a Spanish language meetup, and so there are English speakers and Spanish speakers and people who want to work on their Spanish, and that's a pretty broad and diverse group of people, actually. You know, so if you are a student who has language skills or you want to develop them, that can actually be a really interesting and kind of fun thing to do to get out of the sort of bubble of law school and, oh, well, I just went to the ABA, event in my town or whatever. That's great. But there are lots of other things you can do too. Right.
And if you live in a more metropolitan area, you know, there seems like there are always nonprofit events going on. And oftentimes, you know, if you have friends, especially those who are already in their professional worlds, you might get invited to be at someone's table, you know, like law firms or companies oftentimes buy tables at these events, and you might get invited to sit at the table, and you might think, why do I want to go to this nonprofit breakfast? If it's a nonprofit that's a mission that you care about, you should go because you might meet 10 other people who also think that cause is something that's important, and you might have something in common with them, and you have no idea where those connections may lead. So you just got to say yes and go if you can.
Yeah, I feel like as a student particularly, your default option should be to say yes to any opportunity that presents itself. Yep. Because that's why you're in school. You're not just in school to, you know, go to the library and study the law. You're in school to expand your horizons. And even though it might not feel like it, you actually have the time to do a lot of these things.
Yep, I think that's very true. You just have to decide you're going to spend the time doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, What if people don't want to go to events? You're like, oh my God, this is like the worst thing ever. I'm like such an introvert. I can't talk to people. I don't want to stand by the food table and talk about, whether the shrimp is really good. Like,
well, lucky for that group of people, we are in the age of the internet, and it is possible to network via the internet.
Yes.
I mean, as we mentioned, we met initially via social media, and I think there's a lot of interactivity still going on in social media with Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, blogging, Instagram, a lot of different platforms.
I think that's right. I mean, I think it's probably a little less interactive than maybe it was a few years ago, but I think, and certain platforms kind of come in and out of favor as well. Like right now with the political world being in such turmoil, Twitter has become newly relevant, I think. There was a time for a year or so when it was just a bunch of bots kind of sending links to each other and retweeting them. But now it's real people. So there's, for example, a hashtag, I think I'll have to look it up. I think it's called Appellate Twitter. That's actually really active, and it's a group of appellate lawyers. And, they are very active. I think they're very open to taking questions from students, or you can just kind of linger on their hashtag and read. I mean, these people are like, a lot of them are pretty prominent, and they're just out having a discussion on Twitter about what they do.
Yeah. I think that is, I hadn't heard about that
amazing.
Group. That's amazing. Yeah, that's super amazing.
Well, you might not kill as much time on Twitter as I do at night, but...
I also think that Facebook has taken on a little bit of a new networking life with the emergence of Facebook groups that have become pretty popular. And that is something that I recently have started to recognize can be pretty powerful. My first foray into Facebook groups was actually when I was a breastfeeding mom. I had a friend tell me about Facebook groups for breastfeeding moms that I joined, thinking like, this is so weird. Why would I want to join this like closed group with 2,000 other, moms who are breastfeeding? But then I found out that this resource of helpful mamas was the best breastfeeding, pumping like advice out there. And women would like drop a question, and within minutes, you had all these women telling them how to solve their problem. It was unbelievably supportive. And so then when that phase of my life is over, then there are some mom groups that are on Facebook as well. One is a lawyer mom group that's become very popular. We were even in like Us Weekly because everybody's obsessed with this Land's End
dress.
The dress, hashtag the dress.
Yeah.
And so, but there are like 8,000 women in that group as well. And it's a very interactive group, but people are posting all sorts of things, professional and personal and parenting and life related. And you're getting, these really amazing responses from the Hive, including people anonymously post very specific questions about professional decisions coming up. And then you get feedback from like 100 women who are giving you job advice. I mean, it's actually pretty amazing. This electronic community, and real relationships are coming out of that group. Now, in certain different metropolitan areas, the moms are locally creating meetups or creating subgroups where they're doing more local groups of moms. I have a friend who's a veterinarian. There are similar networking groups for physicians and veterinarians and things like that. And I think that Facebook now is kind of becoming a new forum for interacting in this kind of group platform where you can network in a way that I think a lot of us weren't using Facebook in the past.
Right. And I think the key there is it's a more private group. I
mean, you have to be admitted.
I know that we're both in a variety of groups, and there definitely are conversations happening that would not be happening in public.
No.
And I think that's kind of a key, because if you're using this sort of online persona, you've got to be a little bit careful about what you're putting out there and who you're networking with and what you're saying. And is this going to come back to haunt you? And all that's totally valid. And I think taking these off of the more public networks and into a more private setting can be really powerful, because I think there is a lot that people have to offer and they're willing to offer. There's not necessarily willing to have a conversation, on a public Facebook page at this point.
Right. But I will say that if you are new to Facebook groups or you end up joining some, most administrators who administer those groups will also post anonymous questions to the group. And if you are at all squeamish about putting something out there, or you have a legitimate question that you would like feedback from this group about, you should feel comfortable trying to do some of it anonymously, because you're still going to get the benefit, but maybe that information isn't going to be tied to you on the internet for eternity either. So something to think about.
I mean, I certainly know a lot of people who, even though technically I think it's against Facebook's rules, like they don't necessarily go by their full real name on Facebook.
Right.
And you can probably get away with that if it's something that you feel a little bit, or, people will open up a second account that is a less public account, that kind of thing. There are a lot of things you can do. Yeah. But it's definitely worth looking around and kind of seeing what's out there. I mean, I'm on a mailing list, for example, called the Tech Lady Mafia. And the stuff that comes through there is amazing. I mean, that's actually just a mailing list on Google Groups. But again, you can find this stuff all over the place. And there are a lot of really strong communities that have formed that may be running a little bit under the radar.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of amazing. And, women it's not just women. A lot of these groups seem to be women. I'm sure there are men groups out there. I'm not saying that men don't create great groups where they can be supportive as well. But especially it seems like women in this type of platform, either through mailing lists or through Facebook groups or things like that, are really looking to connect in this way, partly because people are really busy and it's a way to interact with a larger pool of people without necessarily having to put in FaceTime.
Right. And again, it's these loose ties. I mean, the people who are asking questions or sharing advice on this Tech Lady Mafia group, I mean, I would never in 1,000 years have met most of these people. And I don't know them personally, but if I post something, I'm probably going to get responses. And if I respond to something, I'm sure I could take that conversation offline and probably we could build that relationship. And so again, you've got to have I feel like you've got to have a lot of stuff coming in that you then sort of filter into what becomes, your stronger relationships or even your more personal relationships. But if you don't have that input, you don't have anything to work with.
Right. And the nice thing about having these more diverse groups of people that you're interacting with on social media or through mailing lists is when you are doing things like job hunting, you can put out feelers to a really diverse group of people that you never know. You just never know. I mean, we've done some amazing recruitment using social media platforms and have connected with people that we would never have connected with. In fact, I posted something on when we were doing some recruiting, and I posted something on a Facebook group that somebody picked up and put on a military spouses board or mailing list or group or something like that, because it was a remote position. And I got flooded with these incredible resumes from all of these military spouses, which was a network I had no idea I even knew how to tap into. Right. And it was all just through this other connection. So there is a lot. It's going back to what we were talking about earlier about just say yes, just try to go to stuff. Just throw things out there to the universe because you don't know what's going to stick.
Yeah. Another one I've heard about that's really interesting is private Slack groups. So I know there are certain groups of lawyers where you can join. And again, it's basically like having a private Facebook group. Yeah. These are people who are having a conversation and you can jump in and out of it, but you would never have met them otherwise. So I think, network doesn't have to be just, I'm going to go out to this bar association fundraiser. You can use these online tools to make it more convenient for you and frankly, probably more powerful than just the 20 people that you might meet that night.
It's very true. It's very true.
That being said, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say my Law Mama Facebook group was helping me find the best non-toxic mosquito repellent for my son.
Nice.
You just never know when you tap into the hive. And it was a very lawyer mom response, because then some of the moms were linking to studies where they're like, well, the University of Florida has done quite a few studies on this. And I'm like, I love it, because no other group of moms would have been sending me links to research than a group of lawyer moms,
You always know that you're a lawyer, as I found myself saying, in a normal conversation with a non-lawyer personal contact earlier, she's like, well, I mean, there's a lot of research that shows.
I know, exactly.
And you just get this look of are you joking? But hey, it's what we do. We research. We rely on.
I know. And it made me so happy. I was like, I'll click on that link and read that article. That's perfect. Thank you.
Yes. So let's move totally to the other end of the spectrum. I mean, the online networking is just, you never know who you're going to meet. Anything could come through your door. But I think it's also useful to think about really specific connections that you want to develop and you want to cultivate. And I talked about this earlier, but one of those, which I think is very powerful, is the informational interview.
Yes, I think that is true. And we will link to your excellent series on informational interview. No problem. But I think this idea of having kind of a template for how to reach out to people is really powerful. You know, a lot of folks feel awkward about reaching out to folks that they don't have a deep connection with to ask for help or ask to learn more. But most people are really open to this. They like helping other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, your ask can be, hey, I'd love to take you to coffee. And they might say no, but I can have a phone call or email. I mean, you know, people are busy. It's nothing personal. But a lot of people, I mean, who doesn't want to leave the office for 20 or 30 minutes to have coffee? Like everybody, you know, or tea or an ice cream, or you could take a walk. You know, there's got to be everybody's got to get out of the office at some point during the day. Yeah.
And people like helping other people. So, you know, try it.
And you know, again, like it can't just be like, hi, I'm Lee Burgess. I'd like to have coffee with you. Mm-hmm. That's not going to work. But, you know, it could be, hi, I'm Lee Burgess. I'm a third-year law student at whatever law school I'm at. And I'm really interested in the area of law that you practice. And I would love the opportunity to talk to you for 15 or 20 minutes about X, Y, and Z. If you have some time for coffee or ice cream, you know, let me know. Mm-hmm. Here's a link to my calendar where you can schedule an appointment.
Yeah. Oh, and that's really great. You know, I think let's talk about Calendly, which is something we use.
Let's talk about it.
Because we love Calendly. Calendly, if you're listening, we love you and use you for so many things. But
we're not even being paid for this.
No, we're not. It's like Trello. We just like heart them so much. We have to talk about them in Circa notebooks. But Calendly is a tool we got introduced to, Alison, like 2 years ago, maybe? Something like
that, yeah.
Which is an online scheduling tool that is free. So there are, like, you can pay for versions that give you a lot of customized options. But for free, you can basically get a unique link that will sync to your Google Calendar. I think it now syncs with iCalendar. It's got, like, a lot of different options. But you can just email somebody that and basically say in your settings what blocks of time you could meet with somebody, and they can just click on that link and schedule a time with you, and it'll populate, you know, give them an option to populate their calendar, and there's no back and forth about setting up meetings. It is unbelievable.
It's life-changing. You can give them the option for a 30-minute meeting, for a 15-minute meeting, for a 60-minute meeting, whatever it is. And it just avoids the back and forth of like, oh, how about Tuesday at 3? No, I can't do 3. How about 4? Oh, 4 doesn't work for me. How about 4? You know, that's maddening. Yep. No one wants to deal with it. You just send them a link. You're like, oh, that's so great that you're willing to have coffee with me. Here are the times I'm available. Is anything in there work for you?
Right. Yeah. And I think from a networking perspective, any lawyer is going to be like, wow, this person's got it together.
Yeah, they're going to be impressed.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, what is that calendar thing you use?
Yes.
How many people have we had ask, like, what is that scheduling thing? That seemed really useful. Like, yeah, it's really useful.
It is so true. And it's a great tool you can even use with your friends, like trying to set up a study group and stuff like that. I mean, the back and forth about scheduling times and then having people populate their calendars incorrectly is just kind of a mess. So I think it is great. The more you can use technology tools to make it easier to set up times to meet with people, but also remove the chance that you might get the time wrong and accidentally stand somebody up.
Yeah, which is definitely not a good.
Yeah, don't want to do that.
Not a good start to your networking relationship.
Nope. So please don't do that.
You want to think about how you can make it easy for people to do what you'd like them to do. Mm-hmm. And one of the easiest things to do is just send them that link.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. So Calendly, we'll link to it in the show notes, but we think it's a really good option for making it easy to schedule time with somebody.
Exactly. All right. Well, before we wrap up, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about volunteering and being on a board as a networking option.
Absolutely. So I think volunteering is a really underrated way to network and gain professional skills. And when I was not too far out of law school, I started volunteering with a Bay Area nonprofit called Girl Ventures. And then it led to me joining the board. And then it led to me becoming president of the board. And it was such a meaningful experience for me, not just because I care a lot about programming that helps foster self-esteem and leadership skills in adolescent girls. But it was also an opportunity to really network and meet some incredible women, to learn from incredible men and women, to gain leadership skills that I wouldn't have gotten to before, to help manage teams. It was just really incredible. And a lot of the folks that I have met through that work became really great contacts in a lot of different contexts. And I think that if you're passionate about something, whether it be politics or things going on in your community or even on the national stage, that getting involved allows you to meet people where you have a common mission, and that can be very powerful. So if you are looking for something to do outside of law school to mix it up, I think volunteering at an organization is a great idea. I have friends that actually got married after meeting at a food bank, like where they put stuff
Nice.
in. And I saw they're now taking their son to the food bank too. I love it. It's like now it's a whole family thing. I have, other friends who like to do team and trainings, because that's another way to meet, just a whole new group of people and develop friendships and contacts that way. Whatever floats your boat, get out and try and engage with folks. And you can also give back to the community, which makes you feel good. So it's like a win-win.
Right. And it gives you something to put on your resume.
Yeah, that's true.
Just
too.
never a bad thing.
No.
If you go into a job interview and someone's like, oh, tell me more about your work at the San Francisco Food Bank, they're going to like you for that.
Yeah, exactly. Because actually law firms want people who are engaged in their community. That's how you meet clients, and it makes them look good to have their attorneys doing positive things for the community.
Yeah, exactly. It's a win-win all around. All right. So before we totally wrap up, what are our top networking mistakes that people really need to avoid?
Okay. Don't forget to follow up with people. They're not going to remember to follow up with you. So like we said, it can just be a link to an interesting article. It can be a follow-up letting them know how helpful their advice was, how much you enjoyed coffee, whatever it might be. Just follow up. It takes 2 seconds. It's email. You're on your phone all day. I have like tracking software now on my phone that lets me know how many hours a day I'm on my phone. Oh my gosh. You have time. You have time.
Yeah, seriously. Another thing I think people sometimes are reluctant to do is make the ask. Mm-hmm. And I know one thing we've talked about before is sometimes one of the most useful questions you can ask at the end of an informational interview, and I think this was in the political episode where you interviewed a politician and she said she did this to become a politician, is really, who do you think I should talk to next? Who do you think I should follow up with? And then basically, can you introduce me to that person?
Yep.
And I think that, or even, do you mind if I send my resume to you or whatever it is? I mean, you can't be too pushy. It's always a fine balance. And you don't want to have an informational interview that you then try to make a hard sell about hiring you. That's not the point. But not asking for anything just kind of lets the whole thing drop.
Yep. I think that's true. And as we said, people like to help you. So if you say, this is what I'm looking for, it's a lot easier to help them. So this makes me think of a conversation I had on the podcast a while back with the mayor of the city of Sonoma. And she was talking about building her network and that she would go have coffee dates with people from town. And then her ask was always, could you introduce me to 3 or 5 more people? Like, who do you think I should go have coffee with next? And then they would give her a list of people that she should contact. And then she would take those people and go have coffee dates and then say, who else do you think I should contact? And I thought that was such a powerful, methodical way to network. That was quite simple. It was like such a simple ask.
But it's basically going to grow your network exponentially if you actually follow up.
Yeah. So I thought that was really a great way to think about the ask. So if you're trying to meet IP lawyers who are, solo practitioners practicing in small firms, you meet someone in IP, then you can say, I would love to meet, solo practitioners or boutique or practitioners in boutique law firms that are doing IP law. Do you know anyone I could meet? And the person's probably going to say, yeah, I've got a few friends from law school who do that. I'll connect you. And then it's so easy. And then they get to feel like they helped you, which is great too.
Well, and in your intro email, you then get to say, oh, I got your name from Lee Burgess.
Right.
And of course, that person's then like, oh, I know Lee. Yeah, I'll do a favor for Lee.
Yeah.
I'll meet with this person.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. We're totally out of time, but let's just touch on one thing. The absolute worst possible thing you can do when you're networking. Never, ever, ever do this. Do not stand people up. These people are doing you a favor.
Yes.
Do not stand them up.
No, if at all possible. So don't schedule a networking meeting or outing when you think you might get caught in traffic. Give yourself a buffer. Don't be late. Don't email at the last minute to say you're not coming. Like, be respectful of other people's time, because they will remember they got stood up. That's what they're going to remember. They're not going to remember anything about like the next conversation you have. They're just going to remember that they were annoyed that you wasted their time.
Most likely there's not going to be a next conversation.
Fair point.
But, if they did meet with you and had coffee, they're not going to necessarily remember that 5 years later, but they probably will remember the person who didn't show up.
That's true.
And left them sitting alone at Starbucks when they're busy.
Yep.
So just don't do that.
Yep. It's very easy not to do that, so please don't do it. All right. And with that, we are now fully out of time. If you enjoy this episode of the Law School Toolbox Podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. We usually release episodes on Mondays. If you have any questions or comments, we love hearing from you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Allison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com. Or you could always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening. Happy networking, and we'll talk soon.